The civil war in Syria is spilling over into its neighbors, and that's a major concern for Israel. And the CIA says it should be a concern for America as well.
The war is being run by al-Qaeda and Iran, and with hundreds of jihadis fighting in Syria, it's feared that they could bring terrorism to the West. Chris Mitchell has more from Jerusalem.
This week, 3 years into Syria's civil war, armored personnel carriers rushed to prevent fighting between supporters and opponents of Syrian President Bashar Assad. Why should we care? Because it happened in Beirut, Lebanon, a sign the war has spread well beyond Syria's borders. And there are others. Last Sunday, Turkish Prime Minister Erdogan praised the Turkish Air Force for shooting down a Syrian plane after it violated Turkey's airspace.
If you violate our border, our slap will be hard. Therefore, I congratulate first our Chief of General Staff and our pilots.
Also last week, Israeli warplanes struck Syrian military posts after a roadside bombing wounded 4 Israeli soldiers in the Golan Heights. It was some of the worst border fighting in decades.
Israel doesn't want a war with Syria, and the Netanyahu government has tried to steer clear of the conflict between Assad and his opposition. But the conflict is expanding anyway.
I think we can already consider now that the Israel-Syria border is back, is a conflict border once again. And what we're going to see, I think, as in common with Israel's other conflict borders, for example, vis-a-vis the Hamas statelet in Gaza, is that we will have periodic rounds of violence in which the Hezbollah or the Assad regime or whoever it is, or perhaps in other sectors of the border, the Sunni jihadis on the rebel side, will try to redress the balance against Israel.
Muslim rebel groups, some backed by al-Qaeda, are gaining ground near the Turkish border. Here they enter a deserted Armenian Christian town. They shout, "Victory from Allah, we shall soon conquer." The CIA recently told a House panel that al-Qaeda is training terrorists in Syria to launch attacks outside the country, including against Americans. But al-Qaeda isn't the only additional player. During a field hospital visit, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met some of the Syrian wounded and pointed to Iran as Assad's chief sponsor.
Who's supplying these bombs? Who's supplying these weapons? Iran. Who's giving the instructions? Iran. Who's giving the backing for this butchery? Iran. That's the bad. Here's the good. It's right here.
Middle East analyst Jonathan Spire warns an Assad victory in Syria is a victory for Iran.
This would be an immense victory for the Iranians and therefore an immense defeat for the US interest, which sees, or at least ought to see, I'm not quite sure if the US does right now see it this way, but ought to see the Iran-led regional bloc as the most potent and powerful challenge to Western interest and Western allies in the Middle East.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
This could widen into a regional conflict. The news today is that secret documents from Turkey were leaked online showing that they were actually preparing for invasions into Syria if things didn't calm down on their border. We'll be tracking it and bringing you the latest on this conflict. Well, the Middle East isn't the only powder keg we're keeping an eye on. There's fresh concern today that Russia is preparing to invade Ukraine. John Jessup has more on that story from the CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Gordon, a Ukrainian official says nearly 100,000 Russian troops are now along Ukraine's border. The official told agency France Press the troops are not just near the Crimean border, they're on all of Ukraine's shared borders with Russia. Thursday, a U.S. lawmaker also said Russia had deployed much stronger forces headed towards Ukraine. That country's prime minister is now appealing for military support from the international community.
We need technical and military support to overhaul the Ukrainian military, to modernize it, and to be ready not just to fight, but be ready to win.
Meanwhile, the International Monetary Fund has pledged up to $18 billion to prop up Ukraine's economy, and the U.S. Congress is backing legislation to pledge $1 billion in aid. President Obama says more than 6 million Americans have signed up for health insurance through Obamacare. That meets the latest goal, but it's still short of the original target of 7 million. And some critics question if the new numbers are really valid. Mark Martin has the story.
The White House says it signed up 6 million people in Obamacare.
It's people from all over the country. We do know it's a mix of people. and we know it's a lot of people.
But conservatives question the numbers, saying not all of them are actually paying premiums. They've simply selected a plan.
Obamacare ran into more problems this week when the president moved the individual mandate deadline from March 31st to April 15th. House Speaker John Boehner calls the extension a joke.
This is part of a long-term pattern of this administration manipulating the laws for its own convenience. And it's not hard to understand why the American people question this administration's commitment to the rule of law.
I can't think of another law that has been subject to such a sustained barrage of attacks, most of them completely baseless. But that has an impact on public opinion.
An Associated Press GFK survey released before the president's announcement finds only 26% of Americans support the Affordable Care Act. It's also losing support among young, healthy millennials who are needed to pay for it. The latest report showed only 27% make up the total number of enrollees.
When they do the math for themselves and they look into what it's going to cost them, they realize that the rise in premiums and the rise in health care costs is just not affordable. And we've also seen a lot of young people lose their health care coverage because of Obamacare.
Mark Martin, CBN News.
A federal court in Texas is upholding the state's abortion restrictions. An all-women panel of judges in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals made the ruling. They agreed that requiring abortion doctors to have admitting privileges at nearby hospitals does not violate the Constitution or put women's health in danger. The president of Susan B. Anthony List praised the decision, saying from Kermit Gosnell's House of Horrors to Planned Parenthood's meat market-style abortions, the nation's eyes were open to the tragic reality of what goes on inside America's abortion facilities. Meanwhile, in another abortion ruling in Kansas, a court ruled the state can strip Planned Parenthood of federal family planning funds. Parents worldwide want their children to have a good education and a better future, but in some nations, it's hard enough just to stay alive. That's often the case for Burmese migrants living in Thailand. But as Lucille Talusan shows us, a school run by Christian missionaries there has changed the lives of thousands of children.
For more than 10 years, the LP school has provided free education to Burmese child refugees. As an expression of his gratitude, former student Tunai O is now teaching in this school.
LP's taught me many things, and now I want to share what I learned with my own people.
Elpis takes its name from the Greek word for hope. The ministry works to live up to its name with these children who escaped Burma's violence and extreme poverty. The Mui River runs between Burma and Thailand.
Most of the undocumented migrants use this back door to get to Thailand. The Burmese parents bring their children to this northern part of Thailand, which is Mae Sot, believing that here their children can have a better life.
LP's co-founder Maria Amihan is overwhelmed at how God guided them through the years of helping illegal child migrants. They have faced eviction and threats to their lives.
The Lord gave me a verse: restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, says the Lord. And then your children will go back to their own land. And that is a promise that I'm holding until now.
Trained by CBN's Asian Center for Missions, the ministry has grown to more than 300 students. In addition to lessons, students get lunch, which for most of them is their only complete meal for the day. Elpis provides shelter for the high school students. That helps protect these girls from prostitution or child labor. Piu Pue Hue almost missed out on this new life because her mother wanted her to work in Bangkok. She changed her mind after realizing Piu Pue Hue was the first member of their clan to ever graduate from elementary school. Now, Piu Pue Hue is the first Elpis graduate admitted to a prestigious Thai school.
I want to be an interpreter, and my hope is I want to share about God. I want to help the other children also.
Elpis teachers also share Christ's salvation and teach the children to read the Bible. Lucille Talusan, CBN News, Mae Sot, Thailand.
Rescue teams say the death toll will climb significantly from that mudslide in Washington state. The official death count rose to 17 late Thursday, but at least 90 people are still unaccounted for. Searchers are battling rain and exhaustion to try and narrow that list. At the same time, many are clinging to the hope of a miracle in the pile of mud and debris.
As far as I'm concerned, we're still in a rescue mode. I haven't lost hope yet. And there's a lot of people up there that haven't lost hope yet. And so we're not going to run big, huge, heavy equipment over areas where we may collapse something where we could have a survivor.
Meanwhile, Operation Blessing is sending money and staff to the disaster zone. And Gordon, they'll be working with a local pastor there to help him reach out to his hurting community.
If you want to be a part of that disaster relief, all you have to do is give to Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. You can call us, 1-800-759-0700, or you can go on the website where there's a place where you can designate your giving into disaster relief.
A big win for Catholic groups in Atlanta in the battle over Obamacare's contraception mandate. A federal judge has ruled the government cannot enforce the mandate against certain Catholic charities and schools in Georgia. The mandate requires them to pay for and refer women to get abortion drugs and contraception, which violates their religious beliefs. Operation Blessing is providing food for Sudanese refugees in Kenya. Families fleeing war-torn South Sudan seek safety in neighboring Kenya. But many of them arrived to Kakuma refugee camp in northwestern Kenya with only the clothes on their back and little to no food. With the help of a local church, Operation Blessing's teams recently set up multiple food distribution points just outside the camp, providing 80,000 pounds of maize to reach nearly 4,000 refugee families in desperate need. Remember, you can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to its website, ob.org.